What's up, superfans? It is Fit Nerd from Superheroes Ultimate. Welcome to another episode of Heroes Finest, where we disclose, review, and reveal all the latest and the greatest in the superhero realm. Today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of Loki. Here's your spoiler warning. If you have not seen the episode, pause, like, subscribe, and hit this video back up when you've seen the episode. We start out the episode with the Minutemen fighting against the variant Loki. We can see some resemblance between the Scarlet Witch's power and this Loki, with the ability to take over minds by tapping onto their head. While we're seeing this really kick-ass fight scene, we get a very interesting choice in the musical numbers. To me, foreshadows a lot of the growth that Loki is going to go through in this show, from becoming the villain that he's meant to be to an actual hero. It's also fair to mention that we just heard this song with the latest trailer of He-Man that's going to happen on Netflix. And it's also worth to mention that at the beginning, when the Minutemen first showed up in 1985 at a Renaissance fair, we get this interesting woman in the background, which looks a lot like Agatha. And as we know, this show is all about tricksters, and not to assume what we are seeing is actually the truth, because a lot of this stuff is actually going to be completely twisted towards the end. And we get switched on over to Loki being trained by Miss Minutes, in which Loki asks the one question that has been floating around my head since the beginning that we saw her in episode 1. Is she a real being, or is she a recording, or is she just a hologram? Is she an AI? And Miss Minutes kind of answers this question, that she is and isn't a recording, that she is actually kind of conscious. So we get Loki learning the ins and outs of everything in the TVA. And as we all know, I mean, this is the god of mischief. He is the trickster. So clearly he is learning the ins and outs of this system, this organization. And he, throughout the episode, makes believe like he's not really taking it seriously, like he's not actually learning stuff. This is the god of mischief. He is the master of tricksters. He quite possibly has learned absolutely everything he can from the TVA. The TVA really looks shady as specifically when we go to the conversation between Mobius and Renslayer. Turns out Mobius has never even met the Timekeepers. These 3 giant statues that we see everywhere in the TVA, all over the offices. The higher up offices have the Renslayer has 3 statues behind her, but we get Mobius kind of defending Loki. It almost seems like Mobius does actually give a crap about Loki and wants to actually mentor him. He states in the conversation that, why does everybody have to be a specific role? Shouldn't we like switch it up every once in a while? And then Renslayer goes on and says,
Loki is an evil, lying scourge. That is the part he plays on the sacred timeline.
Maybe he wants to mix it up. Sometimes you get tired of playing the same part.
Basically, the Timekeepers, if you are meant to be a villain and want to switch it up, they will not allow you to switch up on your role. You are basically completely destined to be that role. That sucks. That basically states that they are completely taking away free will. And even though Mobius says it's complicated, it really seems like they are really just have a certain way of how everything's supposed to work. Sounds very familiar to me, because if you guys are familiar with Kang the Conqueror, and most likely this whole series is going to introduce Kang the Conqueror, he has his own time sector. Could be a plot twist towards the end that the Timekeepers aren't really around, and it's actually all Kang the Conqueror, and why the TVA looks really shady. And Loki is definitely on to their shadiness. He even tries to point it out to Mobius that you really believe all this, almost as if he's trying to get to Mobius to really think for himself and get him on a damn jet ski. He can go anywhere in time, in history, past, present, or future, and the dude hasn't even gone on a jet ski. Then the mystery pen that says Franklin D. Roosevelt High School. And this is totally a wrench from the MCU, because I don't really see any type of other connections around Franklin D. Roosevelt, except for that Franklin D. Roosevelt did pop up a lot in the Marvel comics. Especially, he was actually the one that gave Captain America in the 40s the upgraded shield. So that was actually one of the bigger moments that he had. We also get to find out about Ragnarok and how much it really sucked. I mean, we saw the movie Thor Ragnarok seeing it on paper is actually kind of more horrifying when you start seeing the casualties, the numbers, and seeing it on paper to me just felt like it was more catastrophic, especially seeing that tearful scene with Loki showing some emotion over his homeland. Given that Loki isn't actually one of the gods, technically he isn't one of the gods. He technically isn't even a god. He's a frost giant. He's a different type of being. The only reason he looks the way he looks is because Odin changed him on a molecular level to look like the way he looks. And nonetheless, his attachment to Asgard being his home and this tearful moment really shows that he really actually cares for his homeland and his people. In his own selfish, egotistical, arrogant, pain-in-the-ass way, he still loves Asgard. And speaking about big explosions, let's talk about Kablooey. Now, Kablooey was the gum that we saw in the first episode that was manufactured from 2047 to 2051. And Loki discovered that the variant is able to hide within apocalyptic events throughout history, plotting the destruction of the TVA. Today alone, I've been getting a lot of people noting that the X-Men may have been an Easter egg in this episode because they heard the word Krakatoa, but it's Krakatoa, not Krakoa. There's two different things here. Krakoa is what we saw in the House of X with the X-Men. That's the new X-Men, that's the new comics, so it's the modern day stuff that's going on with Krakoa. What Loki was talking about was Krakatoa, which is a volcano which had a cataclysmic event. It had a lot of people die around this volcano. It's not Krakoa. After Loki's discovery of where the variant has been hiding out and pinpointing the exact moment where she is hiding out, which is kind of complicated to think about, but she's been going back and forth in time, grabbing all these detonators, these bombs that disintegrate everything basically, which is how they reset the timeline. And she kept on going back and forth in history. She went back in a certain time period, set up the TVA, stole their stuff, and went back to that time, and then did it again in another timeline, and did it again and back and forth. So it does make sense how she got all of these bombs from different points in history from the TVA. She's been killing all of these units and taking all of their equipment. Now, it's also fair to mention that this all took place at Roxxcart. Now, if you guys are not familiar who the Roxxon Corporation is, they're the ones that are involved with creating Weapon H. And Weapon H is a Hulk and Wolverine combined into one monstrous thing. That would be super sick if we actually get to see a Weapon H in this show at some point. That would just be amazing, but it might just be out of their pay grade. Now, of course, this all leads to the big reveal at the end that we get to find out a mysterious Loki variant is, and it appears to be Lady Loki. Alright, so here's where I think about that this show is literally about the God of Mischief, and that everything is not what it seems to be. I don't believe the TVA seems to be what it is. I don't believe they are good. As Loki stated, not everything that is bad, and not everything that is good. And I don't assume that whatever Loki version this is, which I still don't think it's Loki because blonde hair, first of all. This variant does have the one horn Loki like we've seen in the comics previously as a young Loki, but the blonde hair is really throwing me off. Kind of makes it seem like it could be Enchantress or even the daughter of the actual female Loki, that in some other timeline there is a female Loki that had a child and it is Enchantress. At least that's what I'm assuming. It's completely put this with a grain of salt. I don't assume this is actually a female Loki, as we saw in the beginning with all these different types of Lokis. I mean, we saw Frost Giant Loki, we saw Tour de France Loki, we saw... this is... and a lot of people, again, have been assuming that this is Hulk Loki. I don't think it's Hulk Loki. The fur and all this other stuff that's around him does kind of look like a troll, and in Asgard they have trolls. I'm assuming that this is either a troll or an ogre version of Loki, which would make more sense, not a Hulk Loki. But also the fact that this is what Lady Loki looks like in the comics, not what we're seeing in the MCU. And it's not like the MCU to get these outfits wrong, as we've seen from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as we've seen in WandaVision. MCU is going hardcore accurate with their suits and costumes. So for this to be a Lady Loki, I just don't see it. I think she is associated with the actual female Loki, which I hope to see later on in the season. I think this episode was just about the reveal of the variant and to make us believe that this is Lady Loki. Not gonna fool me on this one. This entire series is literally about deception and tricking us. And honestly, this episode was kind of like a filler episode in my opinion. But we are now up to speed. Everybody that has seen the screener has seen both episode 1 and 2. So we shall see in episode 3 if this female Loki actually managed to successfully destroy the TVA's sacred timeline, because they made a whole mess of things. But let's face it, the TVA is very good at what they do, and they all went hands on deck to reassure that they're gonna reset the timeline, which in reality, that means if it's all hands on deck, leaving the TVA very vulnerable. And most likely we will get to actually see the real Loki at the TVA and destroy it, or whoever is actually behind everything that's going on, which could also be Kang the Conqueror. But I did very much enjoy this episode. What did you guys think about the episode? Do you think this is actually a Lady Loki? Do you think this is Enchantress? Do you think it may be the daughter of Lady Loki, possibly? Leave it in the comments below. Of course, if you guys want to show some support for the channel and get some cool apparel and collectibles, place the link in the description below. As always, super fans, smash the subscribe button, give us a like, turn on the notifications, and I'll see you in the next Fit Nerd. Over and out.